October 15th, 2023. The luxury store manager sneered. People like you can barely afford our clearance rack, as she publicly humiliated the young black woman in front of dozens of shoppers. But when the girl pulled out her phone and made one call, the entire room went silent. So who was she really, and what happened to those who mocked her? The bell above the door chimed softly as 17-year-old Maya Johnson stepped into Elite Couture, the most exclusive boutique on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. The autumn sun filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden light across marble floors, so polished they reflected like mirrors. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and the air carried the subtle scent of French perfume and new leather. Maya wore her school uniform, a simple navy blazer, white shirt, and khaki skirt from Riverside Preparatory Academy. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her worn sneakers squeaked slightly against the pristine floor. In her hand, she clutched a crumpled magazine page featuring a burgundy evening gown she'd been dreaming about for weeks. Behind the main counter, Senior Sales Associate Victoria Hartwell looked up from her phone. Her eyes traveled slowly from Maya's scuffed shoes to her simple uniform, and her perfectly painted lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. She exchanged a glance with her colleague, Amber Chun, who was rearranging silk scarves nearby. "Can I help you?" Victoria's voice was sugar-coated ice. Each word stretched just long enough to suggest Maya had wandered into the wrong establishment. Maya approached the counter, smoothing the magazine page carefully. "Yes, I'm looking for this dress, the burgundy one from your fall collection. I saw it in Vogue last month." Victoria didn't even glance at the image. "That piece is from our signature collection." "It's not exactly." She paused, her eyes scanning Maya's uniform again. "In everyone's budget. I'd like to try it on." "Please," Maya said quietly, her fingers tightening slightly on the magazine page. Amber drifted closer, her heels clicking against the marble. She was younger than Victoria, maybe mid-20s, with perfectly highlighted hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. "Sweetie, that dress is $8,000. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at Zara? They have some cute options for, students." Heat crept up Maya's neck, but she kept her voice steady. "I understand the price. I'd still like to try it on." Victoria set down her phone with deliberate slowness. "Company policy requires a credit check for items over $5,000. We've had issues with certain customers trying on expensive pieces with no intention of purchasing." Her emphasis on certain customers hung in the air like smoke. Other shoppers were beginning to notice. A woman in a fur coat paused near the handbag display, her eyes darting between Maya and the sales associates. An elderly man by the window lowered his newspaper slightly, watching. "I have cash," Maya said, her voice quieter now. Amber laughed, a bright, sharp sound that cut through the boutique's refined atmosphere. $8,000? In cash? Where did you get that, sweetheart? Babysitting? That's not really your concern," Maya replied, her jaw tightening. Victoria leaned forward against the counter, her expression shifting from dismissive to something harder. "Actually, it is our concern. We take money laundering very seriously. If you're walking around with that kind of cash at your age, we might need to contact." "Are you accusing me of something?" Maya's voice rose slightly, drawing more attention. A young couple near the entrance stopped mid-conversation. A mother shopping with her teenage daughter turned to stare. "I'm not accusing you of anything," Victoria said smoothly, straightening up. "I'm simply following protocol." "Marcus." A security guard emerged from a doorway Maya hadn't noticed before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit that looked more appropriate for a nightclub bouncer than a boutique. His name tag read Marcus Patterson, and his expression was carefully neutral as he approached. "Is there a problem, Ms. Hartwell?" His deep voice carried across the store. "This young woman is becoming disruptive," Victoria said, her tone shifting to something almost bored. "She's making demands about trying on merchandise without proof of funds and becoming aggressive when we explain store policy." "I'm not being aggressive," Maya protested, her voice cracking slightly. "I just want to try on a dress." Amber touched Victoria's arm gently, speaking just loud enough for nearby customers to hear. Should we check her bag? I saw her looking at the accessories when she came in. The implication hung in the air like poison. Several customers were openly staring now, their faces reflecting various degrees of shock, curiosity, and judgment. The woman in the fur coat clutched her designer purse closer to her body. Maya's eyes widened. You think I'm stealing? I haven't touched anything except this magazine page. Let's just make this easy, Marcus said, his hand moving toward Maya's elbow. Why don't you come with me to the office, and we can sort this out? Don't touch me. Maya stepped back, her sneakers squeaking against the marble. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and her hands trembled as she gripped the magazine page tighter. I haven't done anything wrong. Victoria sighed dramatically, turning to address the growing audience of shoppers. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for this disruption. Sometimes young people come in here thinking they can intimidate us into giving them merchandise, or they're here to scout the place for their friends. We've had several break-ins this year targeting high-end boutiques. That's not. Maya's voice broke. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people who had already decided who she was the moment she walked through the door. Marcus, please escort her out, Victoria said, her voice carrying the finality of a judge's gavel. If she resists, call the NYPD. The security guard moved closer, and Maya could see other shoppers pulling out their phones. Some were filming now, their faces lit by screen glow. This would be online within minutes. Another viral video of a black teenager being removed from a store she had every right to be in. I have money, Maya said again, her voice barely above a whisper. I can pay for the dress. Amber laughed again, that same sharp sound. Sure you can, honey. Just like you can pay for everything else in here, right? She gestured around the boutique, at the rows of gowns that cost more than most people's monthly rent, at the jewelry cases sparkling under crystal chandeliers, at the leather goods displayed like museum pieces. I'll pay triple, Maya said suddenly, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. The words came out stronger than she felt, fueled by a mixture of humiliation and desperate defiance. If you have a balance sheet for that dress, I'll pay 3 times the asking price right now. $24,000. The boutique went silent. Even the soft classical music playing through hidden speakers seemed to fade. Victoria and Amber exchanged glances, their expressions flickering between amusement and something darker. The satisfaction of someone about to deliver a final blow. That's very generous, Victoria said slowly, her voice dripping with condescension. But you see, the issue isn't just about money. It's about the kind of clientele we maintain. Elite Couture has a reputation built over 30 years. We serve senators, CEOs, and celebrities. People who belong here. She paused, letting her words sink in. People who understand our standards. What she means, Amber added, stepping closer to Maya with that fake sympathetic smile, is that this store isn't for everyone. It's not personal, it's just business. Maybe when you're older, when you have a real career and can afford to shop places like this properly, you can come back. But right now, she shook her head slowly. You're out of your depth, sweetie. Maya felt the walls closing in. Every face in the boutique was turned toward her. Some pitying, some judgmental, some carefully blank. The phones were still recording, capturing every moment of her humiliation for the world to dissect and debate. She could already imagine the comments. Why was she even in there? She should have known better. What did she expect? Marcus's hand finally made contact with her elbow. His grip firm but not quite painful. Let's go, miss. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Wait, Maya said, her voice desperate now. She reached into her blazer pocket, and Marcus's other hand immediately moved to his belt. A trained response that made several shoppers gasp. I'm just getting my phone. I need to make a call. You can make calls outside, Victoria said sharply. Marcus, now. But Maya had already pulled out her phone. An older model iPhone with a cracked screen protector, which only seemed to confirm Victoria's assumptions about her. Her fingers shook as she scrolled through her contacts, and for a moment, her vision blurred with unshed tears. Then she found the name she was looking for. Her thumb hovered over the call button as she looked up at Victoria, at Amber, at Marcus, at all the customers watching this unfold like entertainment. "One phone call," Maya said quietly. "Give me 1 minute to make one phone call, and then I'll leave if that's what you want." Victoria rolled her eyes but waved her hand dismissively. "Fine. One call. Make it quick." She clearly didn't believe anything would come of it. Probably expected Maya to call a parent who would tell her to come home, or a friend who would commiserate about the injustice. What harm could one phone call do? Maya pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, and Maya took a deep breath. "Hi," she said, her voice steadier now despite the tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "It's me. I'm at the boutique on 5th Avenue. The one you told me about." She paused, listening to the response on the other end. "No, I'm okay. But I need you to come down here right now." She glanced up at Victoria, whose expression had shifted slightly, no longer quite so confident, but not yet concerned. Just puzzled. "Yes," Maya said into the phone. "Bring the documents. All of them." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Marcus still had his hand on her elbow, but his grip had loosened slightly. The entire boutique seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. "My aunt is on her way," Maya said quietly. "She'll be here in 10 minutes. I'll wait outside until then." "Your aunt?" Amber's voice carried a note of uncertainty now, the first crack in her confident mockery. Maya didn't answer. She simply pulled her arm free from Marcus's grip and walked toward the door, her worn sneakers squeaking one final time against the marble floor. The bell chimed as she pushed through, stepping out into the cool October afternoon. Behind her, through the windows, she could see Victoria and Amber conferring in hushed tones. Marcus had moved back to his position near the entrance, but he kept glancing outside at Maya, who stood on the sidewalk with her arms wrapped around herself, still clutching that crumpled magazine page. The other shoppers slowly returned to their browsing, though many still cast curious glances toward the girl outside and whispered to their companions. Phones were still recording, still uploading, already spreading Maya's humiliation across social media like wildfire. But Maya stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the street, watching for a black car that would change everything. She just had to wait 10 more minutes. 10 minutes until they learned exactly who she was. The black Mercedes S-Class pulled up to the curb exactly 9 minutes after Maya's call. The vehicle was immaculate, its paint job catching the afternoon sun like liquid obsidian, chrome accents gleaming. The rear passenger door opened before the car had fully stopped. A woman stepped out, and the air itself seemed to shift. Dr. Patricia Monroe was 53 years old, but she carried herself with the timeless elegance of someone who had never questioned their right to occupy any space they entered. She stood nearly 6 feet tall in her Louboutin heels, wearing a charcoal Armani pantsuit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her locks were styled in an elegant updo, silver threads woven through the black like precious metal. Diamond studs glinted at her ears, tasteful, expensive, unmistakable. But it was her eyes that commanded attention. Sharp, assessing, the eyes of someone who had built an empire and would not hesitate to defend it. "Maya," she said softly, her voice carrying the hint of a southern accent she'd never quite lost despite decades in New York. She crossed the sidewalk in 3 strides and pulled her niece into an embrace. "Baby girl, are you all right?" Maya nodded against her aunt's shoulder, finally allowing herself to tremble now that someone who loved her was here. "I'm okay. They wouldn't even let me try on a dress." Patricia pulled back, her hands on Maya's shoulders, studying her face with the intensity of someone reading a complex diagnosis. As one of the country's leading cardiac surgeons and the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Columbia Presbyterian, she was trained to see what others missed. Right now, she saw humiliation, anger, and the particular kind of hurt that came from being judged before you even opened your mouth. "Tell me exactly what happened," Patricia said. "Don't leave anything out." As Maya recounted the last 20 minutes, every dismissive comment, every insinuation, every moment of public humiliation, Patricia's expression remained perfectly composed. But her driver, James Chen, who had stepped out to stand respectfully nearby, noticed the subtle tightening of her jaw. He'd worked for Dr. Monroe for 8 years and knew that particular look. Someone was about to have a very bad day. And they suggested you were stealing? Patricia asked when Maya finished, her voice dangerously quiet. Maya nodded, fresh tears threatening. Victoria, the sales associate, she told security to check my bag. In front of everyone. People were filming Aunt Trish. It's probably already online. Patricia's phone was already in her hand. A few quick taps, and she found what she was looking for, 3 different videos uploaded to TikTok and Twitter in the last 10 minutes. All showing Maya's confrontation from various angles. The comments were already flooding in, the familiar digital pile-on that happened whenever someone decided a black teenager in a nice store was automatically suspect. James, Patricia said, not looking up from her phone. Call Leonard. Tell him I need him at Elite Couture in 15 minutes. Full documentation. Yes, Dr. Monroe. James was already dialing as he returned to the car. Patricia slipped her phone into her jacket pocket and looked at the boutique's elegant facade. Through the windows, she could see Victoria and Amber conferring near the counter, occasionally glancing outside. Marcus stood by the door, his posture alert but uncertain. Here's what's going to happen, Patricia said, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. We're going to go back inside. You're going to show them exactly which dress you wanted. And then we're going to have a conversation about respect, assumptions, and consequences. She paused, cupping Maya's face gently. But only if you want to. If you'd rather leave and never think about this place again, we can do that too. This is your choice, baby. Maya looked at the boutique, then back at her aunt. When she spoke, her voice was steadier than it had been all afternoon. I want the dress. I want them to see that they were wrong about me. Patricia smiled. A sharp, beautiful thing. Then let's go shopping. They walked toward the entrance together, Patricia's hand resting lightly on Maya's shoulder. The bell chimed as they entered, and immediately, every head in the boutique turned. The classical music seemed to fade as customers recognized that something significant was about to happen. Victoria looked up from her conversation with Amber, and her expression flickered through several emotions in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, and then a careful recalibration as she registered Patricia's obvious wealth and poise. Years of retail experience kicked in, and her professional smile snapped into place. Good afternoon, Victoria said, moving toward them with practiced grace. Welcome to Elite Couture. How may I assist you today? Patricia's gaze swept over her with the same clinical assessment she used when examining X-rays. You may start by explaining why my niece was publicly accused of theft and forcibly removed from your establishment. The boutique went silent again. This was a different kind of silence than before. Not the voyeuristic anticipation of watching someone get humiliated, but the breathless hush before a storm. Victoria's smile wavered. I'm sorry. There must be some misunderstanding. We would never. There's no misunderstanding, Patricia interrupted, her voice never rising but somehow filling the entire space. 20 minutes ago, my 17-year-old niece walked into this store, hoping to purchase a dress. She was mocked for her appearance, questioned about her finances, accused of criminal intent, and threatened with police involvement. I have multiple videos documenting the entire incident. She pulled out her phone, tapping the screen. Would you like to watch them with me? Amber had gone pale, her earlier confidence evaporating. We were just following protocol. We have to be careful with. Careful with what? Patricia's eyes fixed on her like a laser. Say it. I want to hear you finish that sentence. Amber's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Victoria stepped forward, attempting damage control. Ma'am, I apologize if there was a miscommunication. Sometimes younger customers aren't familiar with our procedures for high-value items. If your niece would like to shop now with your accompaniment, we'd be happy to. With my accompaniment, Patricia repeated slowly, tasting the words. Because 20 minutes ago, she wasn't creditworthy enough to try on a dress. But now that I'm here, now that you can see she's connected to someone who looks like they belong in your store. Suddenly the protocol changes. She took a step closer to Victoria. Do you understand how that looks? Do you understand what you just revealed about your decision-making process? Marcus had moved closer but made no motion to intervene. His eyes kept darting between Patricia and the door, as if calculating whether this situation required security or an exit strategy. I think there's been a misunderstanding on all sides. Victoria tried again, her voice tighter now. We serve all customers equally. Show me your surveillance footage from the last hour, Patricia said. Right now. I want to see how you interact with every customer who walks through that door. Then we can discuss whether you serve all customers equally. Victoria blanched. I'm not authorized to share security footage without. Then get someone who is authorized. I'll wait. Patricia glanced at her watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than Victoria made in a year. You have 5 minutes before my attorney arrives. I suggest you use that time wisely. A woman emerged from the back office, older than Victoria, perhaps mid-50s, wearing a black dress that screamed authority. Her name tag identified her as Michelle Delacroix, store manager. She'd clearly been summoned by someone in the back who recognized this situation was spiraling. Dr. Monroe, Michelle said, and the fact that she knew Patricia's name made Victoria's eyes widen. I'm so terribly sorry about this incident. I've been reviewing the footage and speaking with my staff. This is absolutely not how we conduct business at Elite Couture. Then how do you conduct business? Patricia asked. Because from where I'm standing, your staff saw a black teenager in a school uniform and made every possible negative assumption. They didn't ask about her needs. They didn't attempt to assist her. They went straight to accusations and intimidation. Michelle's professional composure cracked slightly. You're absolutely right, and I take full responsibility. This is unacceptable, and I assure you there will be consequences. What kind of consequences? Maya spoke for the first time since entering, her voice quiet but clear. Everyone turned to look at her. What happens to them? Michelle looked at Victoria and Amber, both of whom had gone very still. That will be handled internally through our corporate protocols. That's not good enough, Patricia said. My niece asked a direct question. What are the consequences for publicly humiliating a minor, for racial profiling, for threatening to have her arrested for the crime of wanting to shop while black? The other customers were watching with rapt attention now. Several had their phones out, recording this new chapter of the saga. This was the part social media lived for, not just the injustice but the reckoning. Before Michelle could respond, the bell chimed again. A man in his 60s entered, wearing a gray suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Leonard Morrison had been Patricia's attorney for 15 years, and he could read a room like a poker player read cards. Patricia, he greeted her with a nod, then turned to Michelle. Leonard Morrison, representing Dr. Patricia Monroe and her family. I believe we have some matters to discuss regarding potential civil rights violations, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He set his briefcase on the nearest counter with a soft thud that somehow sounded like a gavel. Michelle's face went from concerned to genuinely alarmed. Mr. Morrison, I'm sure we can resolve this without legal action. We're prepared to offer a full apology and a free dress? Patricia's voice was sharp. Some store credit? Maybe a personal shopper session to make up for accusing my niece of being a thief. She shook her head. This isn't about free merchandise. This is about the fact that black women and girls walk into establishments like this every single day knowing they'll be followed, questioned, and suspected. It's about the fact that my niece, who has a 4.2 GPA, volunteers at a youth center, and has never stolen anything in her life, will remember this moment for years. How do you compensate for that? The silence stretched. Michelle opened her mouth, closed it, and tried again. You're right. There is no adequate compensation for that experience. All I can offer is my sincere apology and assurance that this will never happen again in my store. Your store? Leonard's eyebrows rose. I was under the impression Elite Couture is a subsidiary of Luxe Fashion Group. Are you prepared to make promises on behalf of the entire corporation? Michelle paled further, realizing the trap she'd walked into. Maya tugged gently on Patricia's sleeve. "Aunt Trish," she said softly, "can we just get the dress and go? I don't want to be here anymore." Patricia's expression softened immediately. She nodded, then turned back to Michelle. "My niece would like to try on the burgundy gown from your signature collection. I trust that won't be a problem." "Of course not," Michelle said quickly. "Victoria, please retrieve the dress immediately." "Size?" She looked at Maya questioningly. "Size 4, Maya said quietly. Victoria moved toward the back with mechanical efficiency, her earlier smugness completely erased. Amber remained frozen near the scarf display, her eyes fixed on the floor. And while she's trying it on, Patricia continued, "Mr. Morrison and I will be in your office discussing exactly what internal protocols will look like, and what assurances we'll need that this situation has been properly addressed. I assume that's acceptable?" It wasn't really a question. Michelle nodded stiffly. "Of course. Please, follow me." As Patricia and Leonard disappeared into the back office, Maya stood in the middle of the boutique, suddenly alone in a room full of strangers. But this time, the stares felt different. There was curiosity, yes, but also something like respect. Several customers nodded at her sympathetically. The woman in the fur coat even smiled, tentative, apologetic. Victoria returned with the dress draped carefully over her arm, her movements stiff and uncertain. "The fitting room is this way," she said, her voice stripped of its earlier condescension. "Just professional, just neutral." Maya followed her to the fitting room, a space larger than her bedroom, with ivory walls, a circular pedestal, and mirrors on 3 sides. Victoria hung the dress carefully on a hook and stepped back. "I'll be right outside if you need anything," Victoria said. She paused at the door, her hand on the frame. I'm sorry. For earlier. That was wrong." Maya looked at her. This woman who had made her feel small and worthless 30 minutes ago. She wanted to say something cutting, something that would hurt the way she'd been hurt. But standing there in this beautiful room, about to try on the dress she'd dreamed about, she found she was just tired. "Okay," Maya said simply. Victoria left, closing the door softly behind her. Maya turned to the dress. It was even more beautiful in person. Burgundy silk that seemed to shimmer in the warm lighting, with delicate beading along the bodice. She touched it gently, reverently, then slipped out of her school uniform. When she pulled the dress over her head and it settled against her body like it had been made for her, Maya looked in the mirror and saw someone different. Not just a girl in a beautiful dress, but someone who had stood her ground. Someone who had called for help and it had come. Someone who mattered. She opened the fitting room door, and the entire boutique seemed to pause. The dress fit perfectly. Maya emerged from the fitting room, the burgundy gown flowing around her like liquid fire. The boutique's ambient lighting caught the beading along the bodice, creating tiny constellations across the silk. For a moment, she forgot about the humiliation, the accusations, the phones that had captured her lowest moment. She felt beautiful. Victoria stood nearby, her earlier smugness replaced by professional detachment. "It fits well," she said neutrally, avoiding Maya's eyes. "Would you like to see the matching accessories?" Before Maya could answer, Patricia's voice cut through from the back office. "Michelle, I want this in writing. Today. Not next week when your corporate lawyers have massaged the language into meaninglessness." The office door was partially open, and Leonard's measured tone followed. "We're talking about a comprehensive anti-discrimination training program for all staff, not a single afternoon PowerPoint presentation. Third-party consultants, accountability metrics, regular audits." Michelle's response was too quiet to hear, but her distress was evident in her body language as she paced past the doorway. Maya turned back to the mirror, studying herself from different angles. The dress was perfect. She'd imagined this moment for weeks. Walking into the boutique, trying on the gown, maybe even wearing it to the winter gala at school. She hadn't imagined it would feel so complicated, so tainted by everything that had happened before. "Miss Johnson," a new voice made her turn. A woman in her 40s stood at a respectful distance, holding a tablet and wearing an ID badge that read, Corporate Compliance Luxe Fashion Group. Her name was Diana Foster, and her presence meant this had escalated beyond a simple store complaint. I'm here to take your official statement about today's incident. This is completely voluntary, but it would help us conduct a thorough investigation. Maya glanced toward the office where Patricia was still in discussion with Michelle and Leonard. Should I wait for my aunt? If you'd prefer, absolutely, Diana said, her voice professional but kind. Or I can sit with you now while they finish, and you can review everything with Dr. Monroe afterward. Whatever makes you most comfortable. Maya nodded slowly. Okay, now it's fine. They settled into a quiet corner of the boutique, away from the curious stares of remaining customers. Diana opened a recording app on her tablet. This conversation will be recorded and transcribed. You can stop at any time. Let's start with what brought you to Elite Couture today. As Maya recounted the events, for the third time now, she noticed details she'd missed before. How Victoria had touched Amber's arm when suggesting they check her bag, a coordinated move. How Marcus had positioned himself between her and the exit before she'd even raised her voice. How the other customers had pulled away from her like she was contaminated. Did anyone attempt to assist you? Diana asked, making notes. Any customer or staff member who questioned what was happening? Maya shook her head. Everyone just watched. Some of them recorded it. Those videos are actually helpful for our investigation, Diana said carefully. They corroborate your account. We've already identified 3 separate recordings showing the same pattern of behavior from Ms. Hartwell and Ms. Chun. She paused. Maya, this isn't the first complaint we've received about this location. There was an incident last year with another young black customer, but it was resolved informally. And 2 years ago, a Latino gentleman filed a similar complaint about being followed around the store. So this keeps happening? Maya's voice rose slightly. And they just keep working here? Previous complaints were handled at the store level. Diana admitted, her expression troubled. But this incident, combined with the public nature of the videos and Dr. Monroe's involvement, has triggered a corporate-level review. The CEO is personally aware of the situation. The office door opened fully, and Patricia emerged with Leonard and Michelle. Patricia's expression was unreadable. Not angry, not satisfied, just intensely focused. She crossed to Maya immediately. How are you doing, baby? I'm okay. They're investigating. Maya gestured to Diana, who stood respectfully. Dr. Monroe, Diana acknowledged. I was just explaining that this has become a priority matter for corporate leadership. Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly. Priority enough to implement actual changes? Or priority enough to quietly pay us off and hope the videos disappear? Diana didn't flinch. I can't speak to settlement discussions, that's above my level. What I can tell you is that my investigation will be thorough, and my recommendations will be based solely on the facts. If those facts show systematic discrimination, I'll say so in writing. See that you do, Patricia said. She looked at Maya in the dress, and her expression softened. You look stunning, sweetheart. Do you still want it? Maya looked down at the burgundy silk, touching the delicate beading. I do, but not here. Can we find it somewhere else? Patricia smiled, proud and a little sad. We can try. But first, she turned to Michelle, who had followed them from the office. My niece offered to pay triple the asking price for this dress. I believe her exact words were $24,000. Does that offer still stand? Michelle looked like she wanted to sink into the marble floor. Dr. Monroe, please. We don't expect. I'm not asking what you expect, Patricia interrupted. I'm asking if my niece's money is good enough for your establishment. Because 30 minutes ago, your staff made it very clear they didn't think so. The boutique had gone quiet again, customers straining to hear. Victoria and Amber stood frozen near the counter, their faces ashen. Michelle swallowed hard. Of course her money is. Of course we would be honored to have Miss Johnson as a customer. Honored? Patricia repeated, the word dripping with irony. She pulled out a black American Express card, the Centurion card that had no spending limit. Then ring up the dress. Full price. $8,000. And we'll need a receipt showing exactly who processed this transaction and at what time. She paused, letting that sink in. Documentation is so important, don't you think? Michelle nodded quickly, gesturing to Victoria. Process the sale. Carefully. Victoria approached the register with trembling hands. As she rang up the purchase, her fingers stumbled over the keys twice. The total appeared on the screen, $8,000. Patricia handed over her card. The machine processed. Approved. Would you like this delivered? Or, Victoria began. My niece will wear it out, Patricia said coolly. Please cut the tags and dispose of her uniform appropriately. We won't be needing it anymore today. As Victoria carefully removed the tags with scissors, Maya caught her reflection in the nearby mirror. She was still herself. Same face, same hair, same girl who'd walked in here an hour ago. But something had shifted. She'd been humiliated, yes, accused and judged and dismissed. But she hadn't disappeared. She hadn't been erased. And now she stood in a burgundy gown worth $8,000, purchased with her aunt's card, surrounded by people who had learned, too late, that assumptions were expensive. Leonard was packing his briefcase, pulling out business cards. Michelle, Diana, you'll both hear from me by the end of business tomorrow. I expect full cooperation with the investigation, and I expect to see meaningful policy changes within 30 days, not 30 months. Diana nodded. You'll have my full report within 72 hours. Patricia took Maya's hand. Ready to go? Maya looked around the boutique one last time, at Victoria and Amber, at Marcus, at Michelle, at the customers who had watched it all unfold. She thought about saying something profound, something that would capture exactly how this felt. Instead, she just said, Yes, I'm ready. They walked toward the exit together, Maya in her new dress, Patricia's hand warm and steady on her shoulder. The bell chimed as they pushed through the door, and this time, it sounded almost like victory. James was waiting by the Mercedes, and he smiled when he saw Maya. That dress is perfect, Miss Johnson. Thank you, James, Maya said quietly. As they drove away from Elite Couture, Maya watched the boutique recede in the side mirror. She could see customers still gathered inside, probably discussing what they'd witnessed. Tomorrow there will be news articles. Think pieces about retail racism. Debates about whether Patricia had overreacted or hadn't gone far enough. But right now, at this moment, Maya just felt tired, and angry, and relieved, and confused about which emotion she was supposed to feel most. You okay? Patricia asked, studying her niece's profile. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then, will anything actually change? Or will they just be more careful next time about who they profile? Patricia didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was honest in a way that hurt. I don't know, baby. I genuinely don't know. But we made them see you. We made them acknowledge what they did. And sometimes that's all we can do. It wasn't the answer Maya had hoped for, but it was the truth. And somehow that mattered too. The video hit Twitter at 6:47 p.m. that evening. Not Maya's humiliation, that had already gone viral hours earlier, but something new, something worse. Victoria Hartwell sat in her Upper East Side apartment, wine glass trembling in her hand as she watched herself become the villain of the internet. The footage was crystal clear. Her dismissive tone, her theatrical sigh, her suggestion that Maya check her bag. All of it was captured and uploaded by @JusticeWatchNYC, an account with 3 million followers. The caption read, Elite Couture employee Victoria Hartwell racially profiles teenage customers. Full video in thread. Make her famous. Within 2 hours, #EliteCoutureRacism was trending nationwide. Victoria's Instagram, previously private, had been found and screenshotted. People were sharing photos of her at charity galas, her LinkedIn profile, her college sorority pictures. Someone had dug up a quote from a 2019 interview where she'd said, "Fashion is about exclusivity. Not everyone belongs in luxury spaces." Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her mother, her sister, her ex-boyfriend, all asking the same question, what were you thinking? But it wasn't just Victoria in the crosshairs. Amber Chun had disabled all her social media accounts by 8 p.m., but the damage was done. Screenshots lived forever. Her modeling photos, her influencer partnerships, her sponsored posts, all now flooding with comments. Brands were quietly removing her tags. A cosmetics company she'd worked with posted a terse statement. "We do not condone discrimination in any form and have severed ties with this individual." By midnight, both women had retained lawyers. Meanwhile, at Luxe Fashion Group's corporate headquarters in Midtown, an emergency board meeting stretched into its third hour. CEO Robert Whitmore stood at the head of the conference table, his usually perfect composure showing cracks. "We have 17 major news outlets requesting comment," their PR director reported, scrolling through her tablet with visible stress. "Good Morning America wants a statement by 6 a.m. The NAACP has issued a formal letter calling for a complete audit of our hiring and training practices across all locations." "What's our legal exposure?" Whitmore demanded, looking at their chief counsel. "Significant," came the clipped response. Dr. Monroe's attorney has already filed a formal complaint with the New York State Division of Human Rights. If they investigate and find a pattern of discrimination, we're looking at potential consent decrees, mandatory federal oversight, massive fines. He paused. And that's before we discuss the civil suit, which could easily run into 8 figures given the documentation and public attention. Board member Sandra Liu leaned forward. "What about the store manager? Michelle Delacroix has been with us for 12 years with no prior incidents. She's on administrative leave pending the investigation," the PR director replied. "But the optics are terrible. She was in charge when this happened, and her staff's behavior reflects her leadership or lack thereof." Whitmore's jaw tightened. "And the employees directly involved? Hartwell and Chun are suspended without pay. Security guard Marcus Patterson is being investigated separately. He followed protocol, but his presence escalated the situation." "Fire them," Whitmore said flatly. "All 3. Immediately." The chief counsel held up a hand. "Robert, we need to be careful. Wrongful termination claims. They racially profiled a minor on camera." Whitmore's voice rose. "We have multiple videos, witness statements, and a corporate compliance investigation confirming a pattern of behavior. Fire them, offer severance contingent on NDAs, and move on." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't that simple. The next morning, Victoria Hartwell appeared on a local news station. She'd clearly been crying, her makeup imperfect, her voice shaking. "I made a terrible mistake," she said, looking directly into the camera. "I let my biases influence my judgment, and I hurt an innocent young woman. I'm deeply, truly sorry." The interviewer, a sharp-eyed journalist named Keisha Williams, didn't let her off easy. "You called security on a teenage girl who was simply trying to shop. You suggested she was stealing. Do you understand the historical context of that accusation?" Victoria nodded, tears streaming now. "I do, and I'm horrified by my own actions. I've enrolled in anti-racism workshops. I'm working with a therapist to understand my unconscious biases." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I know it doesn't undo what I did, but I'm committed to doing better." The video clip went viral within hours, but not in the way Victoria had hoped. Twitter erupted with mockery. "White woman tears won't save you this time. She's not sorry she did it. She's sorry she got caught. Now she cares about unconscious bias? Where was that concern when she was humiliating a child?" Maya saw the interview while eating breakfast before school. Patricia sat beside her at the kitchen island, watching her niece's reaction carefully. "She looks sorry," Maya said quietly. "She looks scared," Patricia corrected. "There's a difference." Maya's phone buzzed, then again, then continuously. Text messages flooded in from classmates, friends, people she barely knew. Everyone had seen the videos. Everyone had opinions. "OMG Maya, is that really you? You're famous. That lady got destroyed. My mom showed me the video. Are you okay? You should sue them for everything." One message made her pause. It was from her best friend, Jordan. "People at school are being weird about it. Some are saying you wanted attention, that you're milking it. Just warning you." Patricia noticed Maya's expression change. What is it? Some people think I'm making too big a deal out of it, Maya said, her voice small. Patricia set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. Listen to me. There will always be people who think victims of discrimination are overreacting. They'll say you're playing the race card, being too sensitive, causing trouble. Those people are either ignorant or complicit. She took Maya's hand. You did nothing wrong. You walked into a store. That's all. Everything that happened after was on them. But at school, Maya felt every eye on her. Whispers followed her down hallways. Some students offered supportive smiles. Others looked away quickly, uncomfortable with her sudden notoriety. During lunch, a white girl from her English class approached with her phone out. Can I get a selfie with you? She asked brightly. My TikTok followers would love it. Maya stared at her. No. Oh, come on. You're like famous now. You should capitalize on it. Jordan appeared at Maya's shoulder, his expression dark. She said no. Leave. The girl huffed and walked away, muttering about people being ungrateful. See what I mean? Jordan said quietly as they sat down. Everyone's got an opinion, and half of them don't even make sense. Meanwhile, Elite Couture's phone lines were jammed. Customers calling to cancel orders. Media requesting interviews. Protesters organizing a demonstration outside the Fifth Avenue location for Saturday. The store's Yelp page had been bombed with one-star reviews. Their Instagram comments were disabled after being flooded with angry messages. Michelle Delacroix sat in her home office, staring at her termination letter. 12 years of service. Ended with a single-page document and a severance package contingent on signing an NDA. She could fight it, maybe, but the legal costs would bankrupt her, and who would hire a store manager terminated for discrimination? Her hands shook as she poured another glass of wine. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent her entire career climbing the luxury retail ladder, convincing herself she belonged in these exclusive spaces. And now she was being discarded just as quickly as she'd dismissed Maya. Victoria received her termination letter the same day. Unlike Michelle, she didn't go quietly. By Thursday evening, she'd hired a crisis PR firm and a lawyer who specialized in employment disputes. The lawyer, Marcus Brennan, was already crafting a narrative. Victoria was a scapegoat, sacrificed by a corporation trying to protect its image. Yes, she'd made mistakes, but she'd been following training protocols about high-value merchandise. She'd been doing her job. We'll argue about selective enforcement, Brennan explained during their consultation. Elite Couture has never terminated employees this quickly before. They're rushing to judgment because of social media pressure. That's wrongful termination. Can we win? Victoria asked. Brennan's expression was calculating. We can make noise. And sometimes, that's enough to get a better settlement. By Friday morning, Victoria's new statement was circulating. While I deeply regret my actions and the pain I caused Maya Johnson, I believe Lux Fashion Group is using me as a scapegoat to avoid addressing systemic issues in their training and policies. I was not provided adequate guidance on how to handle sensitive customer interactions, and I'm being punished for following the protocols I was taught. The statement divided public opinion. Some saw it as deflection and excuse-making. Others wondered if she had a point. Was firing a few employees really going to solve institutional racism? Or just provide cover for corporations to avoid deeper change? Leonard Morrison read the statement in his office and immediately called Patricia. She's going on the offensive, trying to flip the narrative. Let her try, Patricia said coolly. Every time she opens her mouth, she reminds the world what happened. And we have something she doesn't. What's that? The truth. And a 17-year-old girl who never wanted any of this attention. She just wanted to buy a dress. That afternoon, Diana Foster's investigation report landed on Robert Whitmore's desk. It was 47 pages long and damning in its conclusions. A review of security footage over the past 6 months reveals a pattern of differential treatment based on race. Black and Latino customers were followed by security at rates 340% higher than white customers. Requests for identification or credit verification were made to customers of color 67%, more often than white customers making similar purchases. The report didn't just indict Victoria and Amber. It exposed a culture. And now everyone would have to answer for it. The New York State Division of Human Rights hearing room was nothing like a courtroom. No grand jury boxes or imposing judge's bench. Just a long conference table, fluorescent lights, and walls the color of bureaucratic beige. But the weight of what would be decided here felt heavier than any criminal trial. Maya sat between Patricia and Leonard, wearing a simple navy dress and the same worn sneakers from that day at the boutique. She'd insisted on the sneakers. "They need to see who I actually am," she'd told her aunt that morning. Across the table sat representatives from Lux Fashion Group, Robert Whitmore, 2 corporate attorneys, and their head of HR. Victoria Hartwell sat at the far end with her lawyer, Marcus Brennan. Amber Chun had settled privately and wasn't present. Michelle Delacroix had been subpoenaed but sat in the hallway, waiting to be called. The hearing officer, Carmen Rodriguez, was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse in the book. She opened the session with clinical precision. "We're here to determine whether Elite Couture engaged in discriminatory practices in violation of New York State human rights law. Miss Johnson, would you like to make an opening statement?" Maya's hands trembled in her lap. She'd practiced this moment with Patricia a dozen times, but now the words felt stuck in her throat. Leonard gave her an encouraging nod. "I just wanted to buy a dress," Maya said, her voice quieter than she'd intended. She cleared her throat and started again, stronger. "On October 15th, I walked into Elite Couture with money I'd saved from tutoring and babysitting. I had a picture of a dress I wanted to try on. I was polite. I followed their rules." She paused, her eyes finding Victoria across the table. "But from the moment I walked in, they treated me like I didn't belong there, like I was suspicious just for existing in their space." Carmen nodded, making notes. "Let's review the evidence systematically." What followed was 3 hours of testimony, video footage, and documented patterns that painted an undeniable picture. Diana Foster presented her investigation findings, walking through months of security footage that showed differential treatment. An expert in retail discrimination testified about implicit bias training failures. Customer complaints were entered into the record, not just Maya's incident, but others that had been quietly settled or ignored. Then came Victoria's turn to speak. She'd clearly been coached by Brennan. Her posture was contrite, her voice measured. "I acknowledge that my actions were wrong. I let unconscious biases influence my professional judgment, and I caused real harm to Miss Johnson." She paused, and her next words had clearly been crafted for maximum impact. "But I was never trained to recognize or address these biases." Elite Couture's diversity training consisted of a 30-minute video watched during onboarding. "I was taught to be vigilant about theft prevention, to protect high-value merchandise, to assess customer fit with the brand." Her voice grew stronger. "When I saw a teenager in a school uniform, I made assumptions. Those assumptions were wrong, and I own that. But I was operating within a system that taught me to make those assessments. A system that never questioned why our ideal customer profile somehow always excluded people who looked like Maya Johnson. It was a calculated pivot from pure apology to shared blame. And Carmen Rodriguez's expression suggested it wasn't entirely ineffective." Leonard leaned forward. "Ms. Hartwell, in your 3 years at Elite Couture, how many black teenagers did you personally assist with high-value purchases?" Victoria hesitated. I'm not sure. We don't track demographics." "0," Leonard interrupted, sliding a document across the table. "According to transaction records subpoenaed from the store, you personally completed 0 sales to black customers under age 20 in 3 years of employment. In contrast, you completed 47 sales to white teenagers in the same period." He let that sink in. "Would you say that's a coincidence? Or a pattern?" Victoria's composure cracked. I wasn't deliberately avoiding." "You weren't avoiding them," Leonard said quietly. "They were avoiding you, because word gets around about which stores are safe and which aren't. Which sales associates will treat you with respect and which will call security the moment you walk through the door." Brennan objected, arguing relevance. but the damage was done. The numbers spoke louder than any carefully prepared statement. The next witness was Dr. Sharon Mitchell, a psychologist specializing in racial trauma. She'd spent 2 sessions with Maya and now testified about the psychological impact of public humiliation and racial profiling. Maya experiences symptoms consistent with acute stress response, Dr. Mitchell explained. Hypervigilance when entering retail spaces, anticipatory anxiety about how she'll be perceived, intrusive thoughts about the incident. She looked directly at Carmen. For a 17-year-old, this kind of experience doesn't just hurt in the moment. It shapes how she moves through the world. It teaches her that certain spaces aren't for her, that she needs to prove her worthiness to exist in public. Carmen turned to Maya. "Miss Johnson, would you like to add anything to Dr. Mitchell's testimony?" Maya hadn't planned to speak again, but something in the clinical description of her trauma felt incomplete. She stood slowly, her voice steadier now. "I don't just feel anxious when I go shopping," she said. "I feel anxious everywhere now. At restaurants, at the library, even at school. I keep thinking people are judging me, assuming things about me." Her eyes swept across the table. "And the worst part? They probably are. Because that's what happened at Elite Couture. They looked at me and decided who I was before I even opened my mouth." She turned to face Victoria directly. "You said you were following training protocols. But nobody trained you to laugh at me. Nobody told you to suggest checking my bag for stolen merchandise. Nobody made you enjoy humiliating me in front of all those people." Her voice cracked but didn't break. "You did that because some part of you believed you had the right to treat me that way. And until you can admit that, all the apologies in the world don't mean anything."